we decided not to review the book, and instead to indulge in cheese and wine. Edam, Tarquin.
Edam, Matt.
Julian.
Oh, yeah, Matt. I was adapting to who was here.
You just can't get the collaborators these days, Henry. You just can't get the collaborators.
It really reminded me of the Ents.
The Ents. Hi, and welcome to the Minstrel Blues track by track. Today we're going to be doing track 6, which is Contenance. How'd you write this one, Henry?
This one came around, I think, pretty easily. So, La Contenance, which is countenance, it's all about composure, and it rolled on quite seamlessly from Éclairci, from the middle track, when things start changing for the protagonist. So Éclairci, as we mentioned, is about getting into, exhaustedly getting into a clearing and just being like, whew, okay. And Contenance follows on from that when things are looking up. It's just a tiny bit, just like, the slither of light at the end of a very long tunnel. And it's about not getting your hopes up. It's about accepting that, I think things are getting better, but don't get your hopes up. There's still a long way to go. Don't get carried away with that. Keep your composure. Keep your countenance. Even when you might want to get swept away by things, keep your countenance. That's what it's about. So it's about focusing, taking your time, and processing everything, making sure you spend time to not let yourself go too much. And it was nice to write. It was also nice to write on piano. It was quite meditative, and the track ended up being quite meditative in a way. I think it followed on quite nicely from Éclairci. If anything, nearly too much so. Yeah,
well, it's funny you mentioned the piano, because of course we eventually pulled out the piano from the whole thing.
What piano?
What piano? That's a recurring theme on this project, is you build loads of stuff around something and you take out the original thing. But yeah, so it had a bit of an interesting history, this one. We originally kind of recorded we had this nice piano part, and we recorded these beautiful backing vocals to go with it, and it was all very sleepy. It was very
sleepy is a good word. Dreamy, but sleepy is
dreamy.
Good.
It's like in a Disney film when you get to the beautiful enchanted glade and everything's really nice, and we were like, oh, there's two problems with this. One is that it's too similar musically to Éclairci, which is the track that came before.
Which is the enchanted glade.
And also it doesn't kind of structurally in the album, once you've made the switch to be like, oh, things are getting a bit nicer now, it doesn't make much sense to immediately become really nice and cozy, because then it's like, where do you go? So we were like, okay, let's kind of do a bit of a rerun on this, and the backing vocals did survive in a kind of modified form that I'll talk about in a second, but the piano did not survive. And I was thinking about, when you said about Contenance, you were talking about keeping face, keeping a space inside you that other people can't reach inside and mess with. So I was like, wouldn't it be interesting to do some stuff about feedback, which is exploring the sounds that pieces of gear make by themselves when no one is looking. So I took some guitar pedals and I plugged the output back into the input, and it was a nice challenge, because most of the time if you do that and you turn some knobs, you get all these crazy screeches, and it's a lot of fun, but it's very metal-y noise music. So the challenge for me was finding some setups with pedals where I could do feedback setups and I could kind of turn the knobs, and the sounds that I would get would be quite unpredictable and they would develop over time, but they wouldn't overwhelm the music.
That's great. There's a line in the song which is about connecting past as in recent and further back past with present, which sounds a bit like
feedback. That's interesting.
Sort of, yeah.
Well, that's interesting. So I messed around with a lot of different setups. For the nerds, I eventually used an octave pedal, a reverb, and a modulation pedal. It has many different types of modulation. You just pick one using a knob. And actually most of the heavy lifting, the octave pedal is what makes it sound interesting, and most of the heavy lifting is done by the reverb pedal, because that turns something screechy into a more continuous tone. It smooths it out. So anyway, I had a grand old time turning lots of knobs with lots of pedals, and kind of chopped it together carefully, chopped it together carefully, and pitch shifted some bits to make chords. There's this little moment where there's a hopefully subtle bit of jazz organ in there, because I was like, oh, I really want like just like a tone here, but it seemed like that particular tone, the pedals didn't want to make it, because they're a very unpredictable instrument. Sometimes if you're just like, I want a G, they're just like, no. So there's actually some occasional like really ambient bits of jazz organ and stuff that hopefully you kind of subconsciously notice but don't notice.
I knew.
You knew instantly. Anyway, I got these backing vocals, and I was enjoying this process of transformation of this track from quite cuddly and melancholy to like quite. It feels calm, but there's this kind of odd edge, right?
I was about to use the word. There's an edge to it. It is calm. It is kind of peaceful, meditative, but there is this ominous, eerie edge to it, which is perfect because it at least lyrically, it mimics the fact that you're trying to.
You're keeping it together.
Yeah.
You're keeping it together.
But all these dangers are lurking. You don't want to relapse. You don't want to go back. You want, that's why you're trying to focus and concentrate and not be swayed.
Yeah. So I was enjoying this transformation, and I was like, oh, we should use something from the previous version. So I got those backing vocals, filtered them really hard, so you almost wouldn't be able to tell that they were vocals. And then instead of them, they used to be singing a chord. They were kind of singing in harmony, and now I've like staggered them in time like this, so that they kind of like interplay. It's almost like they're kind of counterpoint, I guess. And then that was that felt like the last thing that I needed to make it into a track. There's two little, I guess, like smaller things that I wanted to highlight. One is there's this weird moment. Most of what happened with the pedals I was keeping track of, because I'm a music tech nerd, and I'm like, I'm trying to understand this in terms of like the maths. There was a point when there's a point when the octave pedal started making it sound like a lot of children playing. You know, kind of 2/3 of the way through it sounds like a kind of crowd of people talking or something. Right. And I was like, I got no idea why it's doing that, but I've got to use it. So that was complete serendipity, and it just fades in and out again because I was trying to kind of mold it, but it just went to chaos so quickly. And then the other thing is, right at the end, the vocal wasn't long enough to make a satisfying ending because I was just reusing clips from another thing. So right at the end, the very last note of the vocal crossfades into being a synth and then fades back to being a vocal again. And I cheated slightly. I like stole a waveform from your voice and put it on the synth.
I am a robot, so
yeah. He actually just gave me one. He just. But if you listen carefully to the last note of the voice, it has this nice kind of in between being natural and artificial thing. And again, that's another theme of the album. It feels like it's like tension between natural and artificial.
Yeah.
And that's Contenance. I had a hell of a lot of fun with this one. Nice. I just had a grand old time.
I like how it came around.
Yeah. Changed a lot, didn't it?
Yeah.
That's brilliant. That's the track.
On laisse passer. On se recentre. On laisse couler. On se concentre. Puis on prend sur soi. On se reprend. Et on retrouve un semblant de contenance. La balance se redresserait-elle? Et la pente si raide s'allongerait-elle pas? Ou ne serait-ce qu'un élan d'énergie? Une poussée vigoureuse? Une vague de résolution? Mais le passé, lui, permet parfois d'empêcher l'inflation. Joue sur l'ego un rôle prépondérant. Et permet l'apologie. Ce recul, humble et singulier, de conserver cette dernière contenance, ne serait-ce qu'un moment. Pour commencer. Avant de esquisser, peut-être même afin de persévérer un petit peu plus longtemps. En tout cas, on l'espère. Et de rencontrer passé et présent, en sorte de postérité avenante, retrouvant ce semblant précédent, pré-pomme d'Adam, mais non pas ressemblant, mais bien devenant mélange tout neuf, forme ni vue, poids ni connu, renouveau pas encore vécu.